Speaking of Bud being a huge SEC homer, his least favorite team, Florida State, never wanted to talk about him last year. Never wanted to talk about him. Went 2-10. Danny, I think steps forward are undeniable. So what is the turnaround? What do you think this ultimately ends up looking like for the Seminoles?
So I think the changes that were made on the staff, both sides, were necessary. The Gus Malzahn thing, it's going to be, how is he paired with a quarterback that appears to be a perfect fit for his system in Thomas Castellanos? Mm-hmm. Like, he can run, he can throw better than a lot of guys that Gus won with. How does that work? But I've also seen a lot of quarterbacks that were supposed to be great with Gus not go great. So we've seen that. So that to me has to be the pairing. I think also Florida State has to return to physicality, like running the football, which is one of the reasons I think Gus is a good fit, because everywhere he's been, he's had a top 10 rushing offense. And I think that's a welcome trend for Mike Norvell and this offensive staff to get there. What I wonder is where this roster is that used to be able to just show up in the ACC and push around opponents. Defensively, they gave up way too many big plays last year. I do think the quit factor was real. So I think they've, strong start is relative. I think if they play Bama close, that is a good win for them mentally. And then they can kind of get back on track, hopefully. And then you get Miami, where it becomes, all right, got to play that game tough or win that one at home. And if you can get through that first 5 weeks, 3-2 with close games, or 4-1 with a great win in one of those, then I think you're well on your way to building up some confidence. But if you're, 3-2 and it's not great, then I get kind of worried about the back end of the schedule.
Yeah, I think that the offense will be fine for the most part. I'm with you, Dan. I think the defensive side of the ball is really what's going to prove to be the difference for Florida State between last year and this year. And you mentioned it, like at the end of last season, they did quit. And I think that's part of the concerns when you build through the portal. Because, like, go back thousands of years when, like mercenaries, like armies that were hired by, whatever, to fight battles. When the battle was going poorly, they ran, because hell, your job is literally to fight wars. If you're dead, you can't get paid anymore. So you see the same thing when you put together a team of mercenaries. When things aren't going well, they're not going to give you their best effort. They're just going to be like, all right, I've got nothing. I'm not invested here. This means nothing to me. So I would hope that just in that locker room with the new coaching staff in place, that you can get those guys rallied on that side of the ball, because I think defense, like, obviously talent is huge for defense. And I think, like Bud's talked about it, there's a big correlation between 5-star, 4-star ratings and how good a defense is, but also just mentally, like, being bought in and having the confidence is so big on that side of the ball, thinking you can get those stops. And I just don't think Florida State, like after the first couple games, you lose that game to Georgia Tech, then you come back and you lose to BC. And I think that they were just like, holy crap, we've already failed. And it just completely pervaded through that locker room for the rest of the year. And I think that, like you said, it's important. Like, they can't get their skulls caved in by Alabama. Even if you lose that game, I think it's important that you're competitive in that game. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a game plan that's like, we're going to give the ball to Castellanos 25 times and try to shorten the overall possessions here just to keep it close at a minimum. But I also think they could win that game if things go the right way. So I think there's a turnaround. The question is, how big of a turnaround? Like, are we looking at this team as suddenly one we think will be competing for an ACC title again? Or are we just trying to get back to 7-8 wins?
So my friend Joe Giglio tried to make the argument for me that Florida State plus 1,700 was a flyer for the ACC championship.
I like your guy.
I mean,
I don't know. 2-10 to 10-2. I don't know if
they went 12-0 to 2-10. Odds on that were just as high, probably higher.
You're
probably better off taking a Thomas Castellanos Heisman ticket. What is that? Probably 30-1.
Well, no, the ACC. My response was that the ACC championship ticket, if you actually talk me into it, means that we ignore Alabama and Florida. Means all they got to do is take care of business against conference competition to at least get to the ACC championship game. But are they going to be able to do that when they're going to be, underdogs in a couple conference games, which to your point, Danny, is not something that Florida State is used to at all. All right, Danny, you mentioned the North Carolina Tar Heels. Tar Heels 6-7 last year. Mr. Six Rings showing up. You see a path for a big improvement? You think, turn around to like winning as much as $10 million coaches win? What does this look like?
We do have one of the best coaches of all time that is roaming the sidelines there in Chapel Hill. I know he's never been there. That's the buy-in, that he's brought a staff in there. He's kept some continuity on the offense. He's bringing in guys, from that he has relationships with. And I think the difference in college and pros are the guys that are there want to play for Bill Belichick. I don't think that's always the case in the NFL. Guys don't love the Patriot way. I do think those players that showed up that either, took their name out of the portal or that are signing up to play with Belichick, like, I think he'll maximize what he's got out there. And I do think his mind will put some offensive coordinators in a blender, and more importantly, some opposing quarterbacks in a blender. So I think it's a buy-in into Belichick. Now the roster, I don't like, where are the stars going to come from? It's hard to see. Who is playing quarterback? Still uncertain. But this is me more of a play on Bill Belichick that he is going to work.
I think that you mentioned it with the coaching. Like, when you're competing at the top of the sport for national titles, coaching matters, but talent trumps all.
Yeah.
Once you get past that tier, and I think North Carolina is firmly in that tier, coaching can make a huge difference for a team that has just average talent. And like you said, Danny, I think they've got a pretty good football coach. So when you look at this team, I think that alone gives you reason to be optimistic that they will be competitive in winning some of these games that maybe they didn't win last year or they struggled to finish off. They'll probably be a more competent football team. But this is a team that went 6-7 last year. So for me to consider them a turnaround, like, are they going to get back to 8 or 9 wins? Are they going to be kind of in the ACC race, even if we're looking at them and never saying, well, they're actually a real threat to win the league? I don't know if I would go that far. I think that first game against TCU, which will have a lot of eyeballs on it for obvious reasons, I think that'll give us a good hint to what this team has the possibility to be. But I think this is like an 8-7 win team. So does that count as a turnaround to you?
Not to me.
Yeah, it's not a turnaround, but I think it's, what's their win total? 7.5?
7.5. I've got them 8-4. Like,
Yeah.
when I had to put my pen to paper and just give everything as a win or a loss, I've got TCU as a loss. I think that team is ahead of North Carolina right now. UCF, I've actually got that as a win. I think Scott Frost is taking over a roster that's gutted. I think UCF is going to be kind of one of those bottom 3, bottom 4 teams in the Big 12, though, who knows what that means. Favorable conference draw. Obviously, you're going to end up losing to Clemson, losing a couple of coin flips along the way. But there is not a game in the second half of that schedule where North Carolina is going to be overwhelmed by the talent of the opposition. So as long as they
play Miami, don't play Florida State, don't
play SMU, don't play Louisville.
Yeah.
So there is everything there to be able to have a win total that suggests that you are at least meeting expectations. But I don't see a huge jump forward until the roster gets at least another cycle of recruiting along the way. I know in the tailgate, y'all were asking for a little bit of G5 love. We'll maybe throw that in as part of Thursday's mailbag episode. I'll consider it a mailbag question.